In 1954, a retired accountant named Everett Miller sat alone at a small wooden kitchen table, the soft ticking of an old wall clock echoing through the quiet house. In front of him rested a worn leather ledger, faded edges, coffee stains, years of careful use. Inside were 5 habits, simple ones, forgotten ones. He raised 3 children through hard winters and uncertain times, bought 3 modest homes with steady hands and quiet discipline, and somehow never once complained about rising prices or hard days. Fast forward to 2026, grocery carts feel heavier while wallets feel emptier. Bills pile up like unopened letters on the counter. Phone notifications demand another payment, another subscription, another piece of your paycheck disappearing before you even touch it. But Everett's ledger survived, hidden for decades inside a dusty attic box beside old family photographs and yellowed receipts. Last spring, his daughter Scarlett opened it with trembling hands, expecting memories, but finding something far more powerful. As she turned each fragile page, it felt less like reading financial advice and more like hearing her father's voice one last time, calm, steady, certain. These weren't budgeting tips. They weren't clever tricks. They were reminders from a generation that survived hardship without losing peace, a completely different way of thinking about money, family, and enough. And somehow, almost no one remembers it anymore.
The year was 1954, and Everett Miller was not a rich man. He was an accountant, a quiet one, the kind of man who wore the same hat to work every single day, who packed his lunch in a tin box, who smiled at his neighbors even when times were hard. And times were very hard. Everett lived in a small house on Maple Street in Cincinnati, Ohio. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen so tiny you could touch both walls with your arms stretched out. His wife, Clara, cooked every meal from scratch. His daughter, Scarlett, wore hand-stitched dresses to school. And every Friday evening, Everett sat at the kitchen table with his ledger open, a single lamp burning above him. He wrote every penny down, every single one. Not because he was obsessed with money, but because he respected it. That is a feeling most people in 2026 have completely forgotten.
Today, we swipe cards without looking. We click Buy Now without thinking. We pay for 12 subscriptions we forgot we even had. And at the end of the month, we stare at our bank account wondering, where did it all go? Everett never asked that question, not once, because Everett had a system, a quiet, invisible, powerful system, built not from wealth, but from wisdom. He called it his 5 pillars, 5 habits he practiced without fail, 5 rules he passed down to Scarlett like they were sacred. And in many ways they were. Now here is the part that will shock you. Everett Miller retired at age 62, comfortable, debt-free, with 3 properties paid in full, on a salary that by today's standards was barely above minimum wage. No stock market, no crypto, no side hustle, no viral money tips from the internet. Just 5 lost habits, 5 disciplines from a simpler time, 5 ideas that our modern world threw away and is now desperately paying the price for losing. Scarlett found his ledger in 2025. She was cleaning out the old house after Everett passed. The ledger was tucked inside a wooden box wrapped in brown paper, and when she opened it,
She sat on the floor and read every single page. She called her son that same night, voice shaking. She said only 4 words: "We had it wrong." Everything we think we know about managing money today, the apps, the budgeting tools, the cashback rewards, Everett did it better, without any of it. And today, you are going to find out exactly how. 5 habits, 5 stories, 5 lessons that were buried in 1954 and are more powerful right now in 2026 than they have ever been before. Are you ready to go back? Because what Everett discovered in that little house on Maple Street changed everything for his family, and it just might change everything for yours.
Scarlett was 9 years old the first time she understood money. Not because her father sat her down and gave her a lecture, not because of a book or a lesson at school. It happened on a Tuesday morning, ordinary, cold, the kind of morning where the sky stays gray all day. Everett was getting ready for work. Scarlett watched him from the kitchen doorway. He opened his wallet, counted the bills slowly, and placed a specific amount in a small envelope. Then he put the wallet away. Scarlett asked him, "Daddy, what's in the envelope?" He looked at her and smiled. He said, "That is everything we are allowed to spend this week, not a dollar more." She asked, "What if we need more?" He said, "Then we think harder. We don't spend more." That was it. No drama, no stress on his face. Just a calm, quiet certainty that most people today have never felt a single day in their lives. That moment planted a seed in Scarlett's mind that grew for decades. You see, Everett Miller did not budget with an app. He did not track his spending with software. He did not get notifications on a phone. He budgeted before the money moved, in his mind, every single Sunday evening. He called it his mental ledger. Before the week began, Everett already knew exactly what every dollar was going to do. Groceries, utilities, small repairs, church contribution, a little set aside for emergencies. Everything had a place. Everything had a purpose. There was nothing left over for impulse, because impulse had no room. This is the mindset that 2026 has completely abandoned. Today, we live in a world designed to make us spend without thinking. Every website, every app, every notification is engineered to pull money out of your pocket before your brain catches up. One-click buying, saved card details, automatic renewals. Everett had none of that, and because of that, he was free. Freedom to Everett was not having more money. Freedom was knowing where every dollar lived. He used to tell Clara, "A dollar with a direction is worth 10 without one." Clara would laugh, but she believed it. She lived it every single day. And that belief, that quiet, unshakable belief, became the invisible foundation under everything Everett built. Now, Scarlett understood something else as she read through that old ledger. Her father had never been lucky. He had never caught a break that others hadn't. He had simply decided, very early on, that his mind would always move before his money did. Think before you spend. Plan before the week begins. Give every dollar a job. It sounds so simple, almost too simple. But that simplicity, that is exactly where his power came from. And the grocery store was about to test that power in ways no one expected.
It was a Thursday morning in early October. The air outside was crisp. Leaves were just beginning to turn. Scarlett was pulling on her coat, ready for school, when she noticed her mother standing at the kitchen counter with a small notepad and a pencil. Clara was not writing a shopping list. She was writing an ingredient list. That is a completely different thing, and most people today have never once made the distinction. A shopping list says, buy bread, buy milk, buy cereal. An ingredient list says, what do we already have, what meals can we build, and what specific pieces are missing. Clara would open every cabinet first, every single one. She would check the icebox, check the pantry shelf, write down what remained. Then, and only then, would she write what was needed, not what was wanted, what was needed. Everett would review the list before Clara left, not to control her, but because they were a team, two minds deciding together where the money would go. They compared prices in their heads before entering the store. They knew which items were seasonal. They knew when a product was at its cheapest point in the month. They bought exactly that and nothing beyond it.
No wandering the aisles. No while I'm here purchases. No grabbing something because it looked good on the shelf. Clara entered that store like a general entering a battlefield, focused, purposeful, completely in control. Now picture the average grocery run in 2026. We go in hungry, we walk every aisle, we grab things that catch our eye, we buy family-sized portions of things we will never finish. We throw away more food each week than Everett's family used in a month. And then we complain that groceries are too expensive. But here is the truth Everett understood deeply. The grocery store is not your enemy. Your habits inside it are. Sparlet remembered one specific afternoon. She was walking beside Clara, maybe 10 years old. She pointed at a brightly colored box of cookies on the shelf. She looked up at her mother with hopeful eyes. Clara looked at the box, then at Scarlet, then back at the list. She said, "It's not on the list, sweetheart." Scarlet's face fell. She felt that small sting of disappointment children feel. But Clara knelt down beside her and whispered, "Come Saturday, I'll make you something better from scratch, and it won't cost us half of that." And she did. She always did. That moment was not about cookies. It was about teaching a child that discipline is not punishment. Discipline is love with a long view. Everett's family wasted almost nothing. Every ingredient had a purpose. Every meal was planned. Every dollar spent on food came back as nourishment, not regret. But groceries were not the biggest threat to the budget. Something else was quietly draining everything. It was the last week of November. The temperature in Cincinnati had dropped hard, the kind of cold that gets into the walls of a small house and just stays there. Scarlet remembered waking up some mornings and seeing her own breath inside the bedroom. Clara would already be in the kitchen, stove burning low, just enough to take the edge off the cold. Not too much, never too much. Because in the Miller household, the utility bill was not just a bill, it was a test, a monthly measurement of how disciplined a family truly was. Everett watched it the way a doctor watches a patient's temperature, with attention, with care, with real concern. He used to say, "The bill doesn't lie, it tells you exactly who you were this month." And he meant it. Every single person in that house had a role to play, even Scarlet, even at 9 years old. The back door closed completely before the latch clicked. Not almost closed, completely closed. Dishes washed in a single basin of heated water, not under a running tap that wasted warmth and water both. Clothes layered in the evening instead of pushing the heat higher. These were not punishments. They were simply how things were done in the Miller house, as natural as breathing, as automatic as blinking.
Scarlett never heard her father complain about the cold, not once. He wore an extra sweater. He moved a little faster. He drank his coffee while it was hot. And the bill stayed low. Now think about today. Think about the average American home in 2026. Heating running all day in empty rooms, every light blazing, hot water running for minutes before anyone steps into the shower, smart TVs on standby all night, drawing quiet power, appliances plugged in and pulling energy even when no one is using them. The average household throws away hundreds of dollars every single year, not from one big mistake, but from 1,000 tiny, careless moments. Everett had no smart devices. He had something far more powerful. He had conscious consumption. Every unit of energy used in that house was a decision, a deliberate one, made by a family that understood something most modern households have completely forgotten. Comfort is earned, not assumed. But November brought something else that year, something Everett had not planned for. One evening, he came home from work quieter than usual. He sat at the kitchen table without removing his coat. Clara set a cup of coffee in front of him and waited. He looked up at her slowly. "The furnace," he said. "The furnace needs a part replaced." Clara sat down across from him. Neither of them spoke for a long moment, because they both knew what that meant. The real test had arrived, and it had arrived right in the middle of the hardest month. Everett sat at that kitchen table for a long time. The coffee Clara placed in front of him went cold. He didn't touch it. He just stared at the small piece of paper the repairman had left behind, a number written in pencil, circled twice. $43. To most people today, $43 sounds like nothing. A dinner out, a streaming subscription, a couple of coffee runs. But in November of 1954, $43 was nearly 2 full weeks of grocery money for the Miller family. It was the difference between a month that balanced and a month that broke. Everett did not panic, not outwardly, but Scarlett, watching from the hallway in her nightgown, saw something she had never seen on her father's face before. A shadow. Just for a moment, quiet and heavy, like a cloud passing over still water. Then it was gone. He picked up the pencil, opened the ledger, and he began to think. This was Everett Miller's greatest skill. Not mathematics, not accounting, not any professional training he had ever received. It was the ability to stay calm inside a crisis. He did not reach for a credit card. There was no credit card. He did not call the bank. He did not borrow from a neighbor. He did not push the problem into next month and hope for the best. He looked at what he had, right now, this week, this month, and he began to find the answer inside what already existed. First, he looked at the emergency envelope tucked inside the back cover of the ledger. $11 saved over 3 months. $1 here, $2 there. Small sacrifices that Clara had made quietly, without being asked. He looked at Clara across the table. She nodded once. The $11 were already committed. Then he looked at the grocery column for the remaining weeks of November. He and Clara talked in low voices for nearly an hour, moving numbers, adjusting portions, planning meals that cost less without feeling like less. Bean soup instead of pot roast, cornbread instead of store-bought bread, eggs stretched further, nothing wasted, nothing thrown away. They found $9 more in the grocery column alone. Then Everett thought about the Hendersons next door. Arthur Henderson, a good man, a mechanic by trade who occasionally did odd jobs on weekends. Everett had something Arthur needed. He had done Arthur's taxes for 2 years, off the books, as a neighborly favor. He had never asked for anything in return. He asked now, not for money, for labor, for Arthur to install the furnace part himself, cutting the repairman's labor costs down to almost nothing. Arthur said yes before Everett finished the sentence. By the end of that week, the furnace was running, the bill was paid, the ledger still balanced. $43, found not by earning more, but by thinking better. Scarlett never forgot that week, not ever, because she watched her father face a crisis with no panic, no debt, no desperation, just a pencil, a ledger, and a mind that refused to give up.
And she made herself a quiet promise, standing in that hallway in her nightgown, that someday she would teach her own children the same thing. Not just how to save money, but how to stay steady when life tries to knock you sideways. Because that steadiness, that unshakable calm, is the real inheritance Everett Miller left behind. Not the 3 houses, not the paid-off properties, not the balanced ledgers stacked neatly in a wooden box. The real inheritance was this, a mind that money cannot rattle. And in 2026, when everything costs more, when bills never stop, when financial stress quietly destroys families from the inside out, that kind of mind is worth more than any savings account. It is worth everything.